Externalists would say you don't. You don't have knowledge. The knowledge should not be contingent on such accidental matters. The knowledge should be produced by externally reliable means. If just by accident you have pointed out something that turned out to be a real barn, you do not know that this is a barn. It was just an accident. Internalists would say, well, no, you know that. Because you have internally good reasons for that. It is true, it's belief. So I think the intuition is more on the side of externalist. The words should be such and so in some cases for you to know. It's not just that your belief comes out true. It's not that your belief should come out true in some way. Rather, it's that your belief should come out true in a particular way, a class of particular ways. Okay, so externalists think that concept of knowledge at the end of the day is externalist. It does not supervene on your inside. I don't know, inside is a vague term, but it doesn't supervene on what's going on in you. In what sense? I don't know. Whatever. Okay. So externalists appeal to processes, routines that in most cases work normally, and there are different externalist views about knowledge, reliabilism, counterfactualism, other forms. Okay. These are different forms of externalism I don't want to talk about. Let's talk about how externalism shows us that there is no conception of rationality. Okay. Okay. According to traditional view, knowledge has to be rationally acquired. Why? Recall that rationality was an oversight on your thinking, that if that framework was good enough, you could succeed. Okay. Now, what you have is that knowledge is not internal concept. It's not that you gain knowledge because you have internally good reasons which are fitted within the rationality framework. You're a rational person, you have good reasoning, therefore you have good reasons for such and such view, therefore you have knowledge. Rationality does not anymore oversight knowledge. The picture is upside down. Knowledge is externally linked to the world. Knowledge is provided by reliable processes. Knowledge is granted in counterfactual situations. If this is the case, knowledge is higher, in a sense, or independent of rationality. That you gain knowledge or not does not supervene on whether you have good reasons for that or not. Whether that you have knowledge or not supervenes on external matters. So, rationality loses its force. In fact, you should turn the picture. Rationality has to be acquired in terms of knowledge. The epistemically here is kind of misleading. What I meant is this. In the previous picture, you have rationality as kind of oversight, knowledge, the internal conception, and rationality somehow guide your success in knowledge. When it turned out from semantics and epistemology that knowledge is external, is conception, knowledge does not require the internal links anymore, rationality should be understood in terms of this external conception. So epistemically here means externally epistemic. So rationality has to be epistemically, i.e. externally epistemically explained. So now you come out to what external matters you have to explain rationality. Sorry, how much time do we have?
About a quarter.
Okay. Okay. We come back to examples and details later on. So, if knowledge, which is a way of acquiring good beliefs in external sense, should explain the nature of rationality, then the processes and mechanisms supporting, providing good beliefs should constitute the gist of rationality. Okay? And if it turns out that and the same goes for accomplishment, i.e. to fulfill our desire, we need to rely on some external features. We should have some features to accomplish things. This is important. Okay, so some features play a significant role in achieving or in realizing our desires and in getting good beliefs. Then, most likely, knowledge and rationality both should be understood in terms of these features. The features which explain the external character of knowledge, the features which explain the success of accomplishment should play a significant role in understanding rationality and knowledge. So far we are one step ahead, or one step left to take, that we get virtues. We get virtues. And just a moment. And so if it turns out that these features, whatever you want to call them, do not make a unified class, if it turns out that there is no single feature that has all these features as its instances, it would suggest that there is no single conception of rationality. Because rationality should be explained as knowledge. Knowledge should be explained in external term. External term means that features that succeed in producing good beliefs. If it turns out that these features do not make a unified class, and they are scattered things, then rationality as in a standard conception should fade. Okay, I tricked you enough to believe, Morton? Okay, good. Ezra, go ahead.
These features are the epistemic virtues?
Well, we'll come to that, yeah.
At one point, I'm trying to remember to pinpoint, it seemed as though you were saying that this might be, well, this is what I perceived, that we might be returning to the situation where the ends are justifying the means. Ends in terms of what is happening in the external world is then projecting, we're rationality is being projected from that back onto the self. And so when the self is engaging in action, the external world that he is inevitably manipulating is then dominating him.
I'm not a proponent of virtue epistemology, nor perhaps a defender of virtue rationality now. But I'm not on the same, I'm not following that criticism. Look, what they claim, what the proponents, what Morton claimed, should be understood in terms of the fundamental character of virtues. So it's not the case that, okay, come back to external picture of knowledge. Okay, that your perception is reliable is an objective matter. It's something about you, your environment, and the means of getting some form of information from your environment. Okay, this is not internal, but it's still objective. Yeah, it's not internal. Sorry, it's not. Okay, no, it's objective. Okay, it's objective. Okay, but it's not a way of manipulating ends to get what you want. It's not a way of. It's not a way of ends justify means. Okay, that perception is reliable. Is an objective fact that may occur, may not. And it doesn't have to occur only or solely in the way that I adjust myself to get my perception right. You see the point? Even if, in fact, if I adjust myself such that my perception comes out right, it doesn't guarantee that perception is reliable. Even if I manipulate ends, even if I use ends to justify means, it doesn't guarantee that perception is reliable. So come back to rationality. That I have intellectual virtues might be absolutely objective, independent of my internal world, rather depending on some characteristics of me and environment. And this does not say that I should necessarily manipulate ends or I should use ends to justify means. So for them, virtues have kind of objective status as features required for externalist conception of knowledge are such. Does it help? Good. Sure.
What was the third sentence? We use attributions of knowledge to guide our actions, and attributions of accomplishment as a ground for belief. Well, as I have it from you, I mean, accomplishment means fulfilling desires, right? I mean, yeah. So, I mean, it is very clear that attributions of knowledge and attributions of fulfilling desires, correct? I mean, but why would it be grounds for our beliefs? I mean, I think knowledge tops belief. I mean, it's sort of wouldn't be ground for knowledge, in fact. I mean,
actually, both. The part I put here is the part that is hidden, that may not be seen. But the other part is more obvious. What Morton wants to emphasize on is the interrelations between knowledge and accomplishment. So you use attributions of knowledge. So to say the person, so you say that Sayyid knew that, and because of his knowledge, he did that. So you use knowledge to explain or to as a guide for actions. Though knowledge or belief, knowledge and belief are interrelated, but also there are relationships between knowledge and action. You use them as guide for actions. And the other way around, you use accomplishment as a ground for belief. When you accomplish something, you guess that such and such should be true. The only way that, put it in a jargon of analytic philosophers, the best explanation for success of such and such accomplishment is to believe such and so. So the network between knowledge, belief, accomplishment, desire is more complicated than it may seem. Good. Okay. I just talked about the general framework of Adam Morton's conception of rationality and the new idea of understanding rationality in terms of virtues. Actually, I had another 24 slide presentation, which in
This afternoon too.
in which I wanted to talk about. No, this is not the one. Okay, it's this one. Okay, yeah. About the relationship between rationality, irrationality, intelligence, and logic and language. This is the last part of Morton's book when he talks about that, and a bit about Davidson and rationality of language and intelligence. I would like to talk about how this, if you change your understanding of knowledge and rationality, you should change your understanding of intelligence. Okay, so we may stop now and then talk about it later. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salamun alaikum again. We are going to continue a discussion about the concept of modern rationality. But as you know, mainly the afternoon sessions are focused or based on questions and answers. Also, Dr. Musavian has something to tell again, but we may mix it in a way that if you have question, you can raise your question and then answer, and then through this debate, he also can speak about the concept that he wants to talk about. Thank you. If there is any question, we are going to...
I think this topic is also based on the ideas of traceability.
Yeah.
Models or ideas.
Yeah. Okay. So, may I raise a question? So if there is no question, I raise, maybe I can ask one question. So the question, which is the question of this short-term course, one of the questions is that rather if we can find any common points between Quranic notion of aql or intellect with the modern notion or modern concept of aql. I mean, is there anything common between these two concepts or not at all? And in fact, in Quran we have different concept of aql or ya'aqalun, ta'aqalun and things like that. So maybe, I don't know if this question is okay or not with your discussion, with your topic, but if you can clarify some things, I will be thankful.
Okay, good.
I shall not even attempt to answer this question because I can't. I know I can't. I know my limitation. And it would not be rational for me to attempt to answer this question. But I can tell you some points. It's up to you how to take them, how to relate them to the question. One is, there are just questions, okay. One is the question of is there a single conception of rationality in Quran or not? So the first question that we should decide about is that we are dealing with single, unified, well-defined, in a sense, conception of rationality in Quran or not. Second is there any conception of rationality that is pre-Quranic in a sense? In the sense that even Quran rely on that conception of rationality in some sense of persuading some other beliefs and ideas in virtue of that pre-Quranic conception of rationality. Third question is even if there is a conception, even if there is a single conception of rationality in Quran, well-defined and unified, is this conception Quranic in the sense that it's not tied up, it doesn't inherit background conditions of rationality that Quran is put in. So, put it this way: is there a link between that conception of rationality in Quran and some conception of rationality which occurs at the same time, at the same place, at the same culture, at the same society, or not? How tight are the connections between conception of rationality in Quran and conception of rationality of the period in society and culture that Quran occurs in? Fourth question is, when we talk about rationality, is an abstract level of discussion in which we can abstract from the Quranic rationality, and in that level of this abstraction talk in a comparative fashion about Quranic rationality and other forms of rationality. Because you should find the right level of abstraction to make a framework in which you be able to compare Quranic rationality, the abstracted notion, I mean. Okay, so I think we need to do all these things, and I'm not sure I have done any of them, to give an answer to that question. Perhaps you may help me sharpen my thought about the issue. And keep in mind that we are talking about something, Quranic rationality, that in a sense we cannot understand it except within its own context, which is tradition, prophetic tradition, Islamic tradition, that makes sense to Quran. So Quran should be put in its context. Its context, I do not mean the historical context. I do not mean the context, the social context of the time. No, I mean the epistemic context. The Quran makes sense in the context of Islam. Okay, you cannot take it out, and so we should put it in the Islamic context, and to put it in Islamic context, you need to understand Quran perhaps via tradition. In many cases, you need to appeal to holy tradition, prophetic tradition, to understand Quran. So keep this point in mind, and so. I think I have made just the problem more difficult, and so we cannot answer that, but we because we don't have really, we have not really made enough fine-grained distinctions that we need. So please you help me regarding that if you want to add clarify something what I said.
I may thank you, Dr. Nusratullah, because all of those are very valid and pertinent considerations. There's a tendency among Muslim thinkers, which has been evidenced here in our meetings, to posit that there is a unique Quranic intellectuality. The word they used, intellectuality or rationality, and that it's in a sense full-blown or provides all the seeds implicitly for what came later. And my study, I have more of an academic approach in some degree, where we can see many features in Quranic use of reason which are parallel or replicate or echo the type of thinking in Jewish and Christian and other traditions in the area at the time. The emphasis on exercising one's reason about the signs in nature and within oneself is part of a theology of a certain wisdom type, where the evidences in nature lead one intuitively to perceive and discern a hand behind them or intelligence behind them. In other words, it's the old argument from design, which is a very powerful and widespread feature of Middle Eastern wisdom traditions in Jewish and Christian and then Islamic teaching. But it's not a very scientific or logical argument, but it's very convincing and persuasive for most people. And so I remember someone telling me that if you went out and asked a simple fisherman who doesn't know anything, if you say, is there a God? He would say, of course there is. And if you say, why do you know that? He would say, look at the stars, look at the sky, look at the earth, everything intricately arranged. You think this came by accident? There has to be some plan, some design. And this is very persuasive for most people who don't reflect that deeply, who are not concerned about quibbling, about argumentation. And also the hierarchy of knowledge and knowers. I discern it in the Quran. I think most people who study the Quran, like Professor Awani mentioned, in context with other terms. Aql is not just the only term. But when you see the semantic fields of these terms, there's a portrait that emerges. And that portrait is not that different from the wisdom and mystical and theological teachings of Judaism and Christianity and Iranian religions to some degree. It's not completely different and exceptional. It conforms, but it has some specific features. It might even be more explicit and rational of an expression, which would lead some people to say that Islam in its essence is a higher form of rationality than the preceding revelations, which are also truths. They accept them as true guidance from God. And there is something to say for that. Then there another issue, of course. What was the old Arab notion of rationality? The old Arabs were noted for being very wise. It says in the Old Testament that the wisdom of Solomon was greater than the sons of Beni Qadam, the people of the East. They meant the nomad tribes. They had their own wisdom sayings. They had their own form of wisdom teaching. The Arab sages before Islam were highly listened to and followed. And we have some very important figures in pre-Islamic times who exemplify this. And one of them, of course, is the tradition about Luqman, which is not very clear where it comes from. But it seems that it was some kind of South Arabian or Ethiopian wisdom tradition, which was known at the time of Islam. Even there's probably accurate speculation that there was a book called Hikmat